What's up, people? My name is Jordan, and thank you so much for checking out the Joe McPhoShow Dojo. If you're watching this video, it means you're probably considering subscribing to my Patreon page, so thank you so much. I appreciate the interest. And what these videos are is going to be me drawing a full character or an environment or whatever thing that I decide to post, and there's going to be no skipping whatsoever. You're going to see my process from the very first touch of the pencil or the Wacom pen down to the very end. The only time I might skip something is if there's a period of time where I was drawing and I wasn't being active, like maybe I walked away for 5 minutes or something like that. That's the only time you really see anything cut out. The other thing is sometimes I might narrate in the videos, but sometimes I might not, because sometimes the videos might be an hour long or 2 hours long, and it's just difficult to talk about things for that length of time. So sometimes you'll see me narrate, sometimes you won't, just depends on the situation. The other thing, I probably won't appear in a lot of these videos. This is just a sample for you guys, so you'll probably just hear a voiceover from me. Other than that, please enjoy the drawing. Alright guys, so this is going to be a drawing of one of my original characters. Her name is Atana, and it's from a personal project that I have been developing for the last couple of years now. And so the design is pretty much already settled. I kind of knew what she was going to look like, but this is a chibi version of her, and at some point during the video later on, I think a version of what she's supposed to look like actually pops up. Now, I know I said that I usually am going to have the entire process video showing, but for this I didn't include the red sketch portion just because I didn't know when I was starting how long that would take, and I think this ended up taking me, 5 or 10 minutes or something like that. And in that stage of when I'm really trying to just think about what's going to happen or what it is I want to do, I like to keep it very simple, and I just like to have that time isolated for myself to think, and I didn't want to have to think about the recording or anything like that, and so that's why I'm missing that section. Now as I go forward, what you guys are going to see is I have this red sketch that's kind of light, and I turned the opacity down. It is going to be sketched over by this blue line, and it's meant to serve as a sort of cleaner sketch. So I have the red as like the super rough version of what I think I want, and not everything is making sense. The anatomy's not 100% there. She's missing fingers and all that stuff. But the blue version is going to just be me really making sure I know what I want. And so here you'll see me go into a little bit more thinking and a little bit more detail as to what it is I'm actually trying to get across. And at this stage, I'm also making some very subtle decisions. I think that maybe about 75 to 80% of the decisions that I will make in the drawing have already been made by this red sketch. And then the other 10% is going to be just figuring out little details. So like the trim on the bottom of her pants, and how many toes does she have, and how many fingers does she have? What's the expression? Maybe I'll change the lips to give her a slightly different expression. All those things can make a really, really big difference. By the way, guys, if my voice sounds really low or more calm than usual, it's just because it's like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning where I am right now, and people are sleeping and I don't want to be a disturbance. So hope you don't mind that. So at this point, as I'm drawing the hair, one of the things that you're going to see me do is adjust the overall shape. I don't know why, but somehow when I was actually drawing it, I made the entire shape of the hair a little bit smaller, and I don't know if that was me thinking I'm going to change it later, or if I was being lazy, or if I genuinely thought it looked better. But one of the benefits of working digitally is that you can make those sorts of adjustments as you go. Nothing is ever really set in stone. There's always room for improvement. There's always room for changes. Whereas if you're working with something like ink or traditional material or medium, sometimes that can be a lot more challenging. So that's one of the pros and cons with working traditionally and digitally. You have all the room in the world to change things, but sometimes the drawback is the fact that you spend so much time fixing something that ends up taking you a lot longer in the long run. And that could be a challenge for some people too, because some people just want to make it quick and dirty and fast. And digital doesn't always do that for some people. And actually for me, I would say I'm faster when I draw traditionally, because when a mark is there, I just leave it. And I don't really go through all the exact same steps. You know, for example, when I'm sketching, I'll have a rough layer and then I'll go straight to final. This middle layer, or what you're seeing that's essentially in the blue right now, is something I usually don't have when I'm drawing traditionally. And so taking the time to do an entirely different drawing or an additional drawing does take up that time. So I don't know what we're at in terms of time right now. I imagine close to about 20 minutes working on this one drawing, and I'm still editing it and still getting it primed for the actual clean lines that I'm going to be doing. And I'm doing some things here where I'm adjusting the position and the pose. Sometimes it's just a matter of what I think feels better at the time for what I want to do. And for a lot of these drawings, I tend to have a lot of things in my head that are kind of resolved, and I just haven't put them down on the paper just yet. Sort of like how I imagine a musician works, where they have the idea of what they want to do in their head, but the actual application of it has yet to be seen. Adjusting things like the eyes, making sure everything feels consistent with the character. And ultimately, with a chibi drawing like this, I want to make sure it's cute. I want to make sure it's cute. I want to make sure it looks like the character that I created, and that it's selling the story point and selling who she is as a character. And I think that even people who don't know who this character is can get a sense of her personality and what she does and her abilities and things like that. By the way, guys, there might be a couple of times where you might see like a straight line just pop out of nowhere. For some reason, the cursor isn't showing up when it wasn't showing up when I recorded it. I don't know why. It's recorded in a lot of my other videos, but I guess something was glitchy in this. But anyway, sometimes you'll see like a random vertical line or something pop by, and that's just Photoshop being glitchy. So if you ever see those, that's what's going on there. Now, the reason I'm adjusting some of the design, her hair band, that's actually a little piece of jewelry, and I'm changing up her hairline. I didn't want to create a tangent between those two. So this is also a stage where I will focus on that, and I can make sure that all the little details just like that are resolved. Even down to getting things like the muscles and the arm to make sure that makes sense. So it's not just like Powerpuff Girl arms or something like that, where you can actually see that it's a viable pose for the character. Alright, so at this stage, I'm pretty happy with what I have here, and now it's time for me to get into the clean line art. So what I'll do is I'll make a brand new layer, and you see it on the side, it's just called line. And I have a particular brush that I like to use for when I'm doing more cartoony drawings or when I want the line weight to be pretty uniform. And it's actually a brush that I got from Loish, the digital artist. If I can remember, I'll post a link in the description, but I honestly don't remember where I got it from. I know I bought it, but I guess I have to go on her website or something, but it was a couple of years ago. Anyway, I really like this brush because it just gives me such smooth and consistent lines. I don't have to worry about the line weight or anything. It just feels really, really smooth and simple. Now, one of the other things that you're going to see me do is I try, especially at this stage, to get all of my lines done in one fell swoop. So for the goggles, for example, I just did those lines in one continuous stroke. I wasn't doing a lot of pecking. I wasn't questioning my decisions at this stage like I was in some of the other areas. Some of those areas were just me figuring it out and making sure I'm getting the shape right. And I've done all of the hard work at this point. Whenever I do line work, it's actually probably the most tedious, but it's also the most rewarding, because now this is kind of where I can just zone out and sort of just do my thing, just do what I do. Because like I said, all the hard work has been done, all the design thinking has been done, the pose, the expression, the story, all those things are resolved, and now it's just a matter of me figuring out how to get it to look clean. And one of the things that you guys will have also probably noticed is at this stage I zoom in heavily. I'm really close. I have a 22-inch Cintiq screen that I'm drawing on, and I zoom in almost all the way, and it just really helps me to create that nice smooth line that you guys are getting a chance to see right here. I'm also doing little things like rotating my canvas whenever I need it to make a line easier for me to draw. I'm left-handed, and so naturally drawing things that have a curve on the right side of things is an easier thing for me. So every once in a while you might actually see me turn the canvas upside down or whatever, just to make it a little easier for myself. And another thing you guys might also notice is I tend to draw up to down. So I start at the top of the canvas and then I pull my line towards me. I find that much easier to get control, and I notice that whenever I try and draw the opposite way, it creates a very strange movement and strange motion, and I never have control. And whenever I'm drawing, especially at this stage, control is the number one thing. And if you are working traditionally, you'll know how important that is. Thankfully, I have things like the undo button, so if something goes horribly wrong, then I can always adjust that. But you have to make sure you maintain that control. It may look fast for you guys. I've been told that I draw pretty quickly. For me, it actually feels very slow. I'm very focused on how my lines are looking. I'm not worried about going fast. And matter of fact, when I was doing this, I didn't even keep an eye on the time, and I didn't even know how long this video would be until I pressed stop recording. Like literally at that moment is when I found out, oh, this video is an hour and change. But I was going so slow in my head because I wanted to make sure those lines were so accurate and were so precise in what I wanted that to be. And at this stage, I'm also doing things like filling in the black areas. So these are the pupils to her eyes, and I'm using the lasso tool for that because it just makes things a lot easier. If I just circle the area that I want, I can either fill it with the paint tool, or I can just make my brush bigger and just swipe the brush right across it, and that solves all my problems right there. One of the things I'm doing right here is I'm just adjusting the eyes because I feel like eyes are always so important for multiple reasons, but one is because unless someone has a lazy eye, you always want to make sure the pupils are pointing in the same exact direction. And if they don't, then it's going to be so easy to make it stand out in a really bad way. Something else you guys are probably seeing is I'm drawing through my shapes. So I tend to, well, this is something I learned in school, especially when you're working digitally. Just draw through all the lines, and then the places that you don't want, just erase it out, especially when it's digital, because it makes it so easy to do that. If it were like an ink pen, obviously you couldn't do that when you're working traditionally. Even a pencil on some level, you don't, I mean, you have the freedom to do that. It erases, but usually there's always a remnant of whatever that is there. So I would probably not do that. But here it's good to draw through the shape just because, but here it's really good to draw through the shape just because it helps you to keep your arm moving. It helps you to make sure that shape is fluid and it doesn't end abruptly. So let's say you're doing an ellipse over or something like that. Maybe it at the edge. So let's say you're doing an ellipse. Maybe at the edge of that ellipse, it starts to get a little bit more flat or a little bit more straight. And so now you have to compensate for that, and you end up having to draw the line over and over again. Whereas if you're drawing through the shapes, then you can erase out and determine, okay, this line needs to be a little bit rounder, this line needs to be this or that. And I think it's really, really helpful to think in terms of that. So for example, with just like the back and her leg, I drew through that line and then I erased out with the pants because I figured that it had a little bit of thickness to it. And I did that because I knew that the leg and the body is naturally going to connect, and especially with this style, you can keep it a straight line. And then all I have to do is just put the cute little pants on her and give it a little thickness, and we're good to go. Every once in a while, I'll also change things up a little bit from the sketch just to make it more fluid, or if I see that there's a tangent or there's a better way to design those shapes, sometimes I'll veer off of the diagram, quote unquote, just a little bit to make sure I get the best result for what I'm doing. One of the things I like that I'm doing here is just thickening up some of these lines. And by doing that, it actually makes the drawing feel much more alive to me. Usually in something like an animated still, a lot of the lines are going to be the exact same width and everything, just because of the sake of consistency. It's much easier if everyone's drawing a thin line than if the line were to be jagged in some places and thicker in some places. And just for the industry, it's easier that way. But when you're doing an illustration, when you're just doing a little doodle or a drawing like this, thicken up some of those lines. It can really push things forward. It can really make things feel alive and much more vibrant depending on the style that you're going for. And I always really enjoyed that look, even if I don't get to do it all the time. And so I'm finding a great opportunity to do that with the locks in her hair and some of the objects. Alright, at this stage, I would say that the line art is complete and I'm happy with it. Everything feels fluid and it's moving the way that I want. And so now it's a stage for color. Usually what I do is I will make a selection outside of the character on the white of the background, and then I'll invert that, make a new layer, and then I'll fill it with whatever color I feel like. And so for this case, I chose this kind of orangish yellow kind of color. This is actually the character I created, who the chibi is based on. And so now this is what I did. I basically just pulled the file over from my computer. I skipped showing you guys all of that. And so now you guys can see what colors I'm thinking about. And so I just move that to the side, make it really small, because the goal is not to see the design, it's really just a color pick, because the local colors are basically the same. And so now what I'm doing is I am selecting different parts on the line art layer. In Clip Studio Paint, you can actually do something really cool where you can select on a different layer and then fill it, and it works just fine. But when you're working in Photoshop specifically, you can only select things that are on that layer. So you'll want to make sure that you select the lines on the line layer and then go to the new layer to fill it. Otherwise, you'll have your line and your color on the same layer. And if you ever want to make a change to that, it's horrendous. And it's basically like starting over. It's sort of like the meme, you're drawing on the wrong layer. So I fill in most of the major spaces that I'm seeing, and every once in a while there might be an area that I need to fill, and so sometimes I'll just go in manually and just fill that in because it's faster oftentimes. If I can't just fill it with a bigger lasso or something like that, then I'll just do it manually, because at this point it's really just about not wasting time. Because I think on this day I drew multiple of these chibi drawings and I wanted to get to the next one, or maybe I was just excited or I had other things to do. And realistically, as much time as I would love to spend on art, we can't spend every waking second doing that. And so now I'm just basically repeating that process. I'm going into color pick exactly what I need, and then I'm going to check all the little spaces that need to be filled with color. And again, if I ever need to change it, it's going to be much more simple this way. Ordinarily also, if I were working on a character design and I didn't know what colors there were going to be, I would generally have different layers for each color. I find that much more reasonable than to have it all on one layer in case you need to make a change. But because I already had the color choices picked out for me, I knew exactly what I wanted, I'm just doing it all on one layer. One, to save space on my computer, and two, just to make the process seamless and simple. And I didn't have to worry about which layer is which. So I decided to put this on a blue background just because it would make it easier for me to see the colors that I'm working with. And this is a good opportunity to double check to make sure everything is looking right the way that I feel. And also there tends to be a little bit of a halo effect sometimes when I do the selection at the very beginning. It doesn't do it properly. Sometimes it takes in some of the background, or there's like a little thin line of color pixels that I don't actually want. So this gives me the opportunity to go and fix that. Okay, so now you're seeing me work on the shadow layer. And this is actually one of my favorite stages because it's it's just sort of putting the icing on the cake. Usually I'll pick a purple or a bluish color to be the shadow, depending on the light source. Sometimes it changes, but purple I have found to be the most reliable for me in a consistent setting. I've never really had any issues with a purple shadow. And what I do actually is I choose that color so it stands out to me whenever I am coloring. And what I'll do is I will make it that color, and then I'll put it on different layer modes. So it'll probably be multiply or overlay, and then I'll lower the opacity of that. But at least this way, I know exactly where my shadows are, and there's no mistaking the color of the shadow from the color of her hair or her skin or her shirt or anything like that. And so now at this final stage, I am basically just creating her superpowers. And the way I started this was just by doing simple basic shapes that I envisioned in my head. You don't have to do basic shapes if you're trying to do this. It's just kind of the style of the way that I wanted her powers to look. I wanted them to look kind of geometric and, like you were in your geometry class again and learning about the Pythagorean theorem and all this stuff. It's very, very visual. And then one of my favorite stages of this is I will turn that ability white, and then I'll do a layer effect, and I'll do outer glow, and I'll change that to yellow for her specifically. Other characters I might choose a different color, but it basically creates this awesome glowing effect, which is something I really, really like. And by doing that, it just saves me so much work, because what I used to do before I learned about this is I would duplicate the layer, and then I would do a Gaussian blur, and then I would duplicate that layer like 5 or 6 times, and then I'd merge it all, and it would be really time consuming. So now with the layer styles, I can just keep everything on one layer and make everything really, really simple. And then the glow is automatically done for me. And then if I ever want to make a change to the shape, like how I'm doing here, then the glow will automatically adjust to whatever the shape I'm creating is. And it just saves so much time and effort. Alright, and then the final touch, I usually just merge the color layer, turn to a purple, and then distort it so it becomes her shadow. And I'll put it on different layer mode and change the opacity, make it darker and all that stuff. And this is the final result. So thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you again for even considering to support me on Patreon. You have no idea what that means to me, and I hope that I can provide the content that you want to see on this channel and on this Patreon. So take care, guys. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.